Record and share the screen. And thank you all so much for attending today. I really appreciate the interest and enthusiasm as always. I'm Chris Daniel. I'm a faculty PD manager for EKU Online, which means I hopefully help faculty do the things they need to do and know the things they need to know to get prepared. If you haven't muted your mic, please go ahead and do that. And we'll go ahead and get started. And also, this worked really well because last time it was a dialogue. I had a direction I thought was going to be useful, but you all took it and ran with it, and I think it made it a really great hour together. So I hope you will do that as we go along. A link to the resource pages should be a link in the chat, and this presentation is linked. The potential topics in my mind are what's new. We've spent about a month apart since we started talking about ChatGPT via this forum. What do we think is new in terms of technology, in terms of reactions to the technology? We can talk about cheating if you want. I have some ideas about that. I'm sure you all have all kinds of ideas about it. I also started thinking about the potential instructional uses for this technology. So I'm really interested to hear what you all think about that. And yeah, Eric, and I'll make sure you get them regardless. But let me see if I can paste to the. It's going to be problematic with me the way I've got it set up, but we'll get it to you. And
don't worry about it for the moment. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And then, so like, what are some of the instructional uses from an instructional design and rapid prototyping standpoint? Like, I have some ideas about that, and I hope you all will too. Even beyond my small purview of the world. And what are we going to do about all this relative to academic dishonesty? What are your thoughts, and what actions have you taken already? So with that, I think I'm going to break out of this direct presentation and try to show a couple of these links that I have under new tools. First of all, chat, and please break in and interrupt me at any time. I want this to be really, truly a dialogue, because that's where it's going to be the richest. ChatGPT now is a paid service. I'm sure lots of you followed this, all of these things and more, and I'm really looking for the more. But for $20 a month, you can get primary access to ChatGPT during, well, it's trying to redirect me now, and it's not. You can get a more elevated level of access to ChatGPT. You can also get first dibs on new technologies and new advents that they publish. So if you want to subscribe to that, I have not done so, but that supposedly you're going to be able to do that. I imagine they're getting pounded right now, so I'm not able to show that, but I hope that link should link you to a description of that service and the pricing and all those things. Another thing that I wanted to show that I can't, my primary computer, my home computer died, but Bing has their own, and NPR actually covered this, but Bing has their own version of an AI enhanced search engine. Now, what I can show is some examples, but my wife has digestive issues. So I asked Bing, look, she's got FODMAP issues. She's sensitive to onions, garlic, tomato, and dairy. Can you give me a meal plan for the week? And it spit that out in a rather not, I mean, it's not going to win any culinary prizes. James Beard's not knocking, but it gave like a weekly meal plan, including snacks. And then I asked it, okay, well, we don't like grapes, and so it reformulated the meal plan. And the interesting thing, I'll just show an example of, and the reason it won't give me this is I need the new Bing, and with my EKU Edge browser on my EKU computer, it doesn't give me access to that for whatever reason. But so here is an example here in the web window about what a sample dialogue with the sort of concomitant web search results would give you. So it's kind of an interesting take. My sense is that it's not nearly as robust as ChatGPT, but it gives links and it gives search results based on this dialogue. And you can continue the when you actually have the new Bing, which is the new search engine on the Microsoft Edge web browser, which is their latest web browser after they got rid of Internet Explorer. It gives you, kind of a web search based result. Who wants to speak?
Chris, this is Cindy. I just wanted to say, I was going to put it in the chat, but I was reading an article, I think it was either yesterday or this morning about, I think it was last night, about Bing AI. And I'm on a waiting list, so I don't know when I'll get access to it. But I did hear from this article that it actually gives legitimate sources, which ChatGPT does not. So I know that if I'm remembering correctly, Microsoft Bing, their AI is built on ChatGPT, if I'm remembering.
That's right.
And so it's kind of like combining ChatGPT with a Google search, except it's Bing. So question mark. But anyway, that's why I didn't jump on the bandwagon, because I was like, but it's Bing. Like, really, I don't know about this. So, but I did. That's one of the things that the article was pointing out, was that it actually will give legitimate sources, which is something ChatGPT just hasn't gotten right yet.
Sure. Thank you for that input. My experience has been mixed on it, and I've not delved too far into the academic aspect of it. I'm just kind of being a smart aleck with it, asking it, real life question, what mundane real life questions to see what it will return. Does anybody else have any direct experience with it?
Hey, everybody, I'll jump in here. I teach a Microsoft applications class, so it's Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. And one of the things I've done is the first semester teaching this class, and I'm redesigning it. But what I'm doing is using ChatGPT to make example materials that they can then format in Microsoft Word. So one of the productive outputs I've worked towards in this class is getting students to formulate a fully formatted research paper. So that means creating your bibliography with sources, table of content. We can go through all the things beyond typing, working with images and a table of figures. So I'm teaching them to pull all that together in a paper using example materials and sources. And the ones that have been coming to class, paying attention, we've been talking about ChatGPT, and they can essentially, the ones that have been paying attention can essentially do this themselves. The learning curve is super easy. Once you find your way to the website, you can have it type a 10,000 word paper on climate change. I think I did a 5,000 word paper on climate change as an example of, a research paper that they could research, put in citations, build a bibliography for using sources. So it's very productive for us to learn how to do that, but I could also see how students carrying knowledge like that forward, how it's so easy to fool common assessment methodologies. So I just wanted to bring that to the table and say, hey, it's done a lot of good for this class, but if people are using it in the wrong way and the assessment isn't checking the paper for evidence of AI or evidence that sources have been kind of mangled in a generic paper, then that's a danger. And I'm hoping that we can find some ways to safeguard with the faculty, the people who aren't looking out for this stuff.
Yep. Thank you for that. In fact, I'm hoping to present at AECT, which is a conference in my discipline, and my tentative title of the presentation is From Lorem Ipsum to Fake Subject Matter Expert. And I think what you're proposing is, like a more robust version of dummy text. And that's maybe a potential instructional use. So thanks for that. Who else would like to speak? Has anyone heard about Google Bard? Google Bard is supposedly their answer to ChatGPT, and it had a rather interesting failure upon the first demonstration, which caused the stock price for Google to, I don't know, that they said plummet. I don't know how far plummet is when you're, I don't know, $300 a share, but it supposedly went down quite, maybe it's not that high a share. I don't really know, but so that was an interesting advent. And I have some links in the presentation about problems with Bard. We can't look at Bard right now, as far as I know. Salesforce has a version of their own GPT. They're a customer relationship management. I don't know. They're a monolith. They do all kinds of things for sales. and customer relationship types of things on computers. And so they have that. You can check that link out. UChat is quite an interesting little tool, and you can, let me see if it'll let me add it or if I have to sign up on this browser. Everything wants to be slow as it can be today. Everybody's hammering these things. I'm having trouble getting at that link. And maybe I'm just having trouble with my EKU internet connection right now. I don't know. Character AI is interesting because there are several canned personas that they have trained text on. For example, they have chatbot Elon Musk, and they've put in every Twitter, every tweet that he has posted and used that to create responses to various questions. And so he's chatbot Elon is rather smart alecky, and so he's been interesting to ask questions of. But you can check those links out. Now, in terms of output detection, has anybody discovered any new tools?
Well, can I ask a question, Chris?
Please do.
I haven't discovered any new tools yet, but I wanted to ask a question which I brought up at I think you were there at the philosophy roundtable discussion about ChatGPT, and at the time it didn't get much traction. But I'll ask it again here since there's more and different people who might be able to help me out here. Given what seems to be the proliferating variety and the increasing of all of the AI tools out there, in terms of, as Justin put it, traditional assessment methodologies or monitoring and, detecting the improper use of these things when we read and grade, is it within our power, like technically at EKU, and is it within our rights at EKU for us to, for example, require students to compose essays within their EKU Google Doc account, in which case we would be able to tell if and when they and how they had added material to those documents, because there's an edit tracking history. And so this was my first thought, maybe naive, I don't know, but my first thought about potentially finding a way campus-wide, right, a systematic way that we could just from the top down require everybody to use, rather than, trying in an ad hoc, reactive manner individually to figure out what the heck is going on. So that's my question, and I'll keep asking it here and in other forums until I get, what seems to me to be a clear answer.
I'm going to thank you. I'm going to make it a point to really consider that in the next couple of weeks, because you're right. Like if somebody just dumps 5 pages into a Google Doc, you're going to get you should be able to get some sort of sense for that. So for me, it may be another important data point when we're trying to consider the overall picture, where these output detection methods, to Matt Winslow's point, and I agree, they're going to be mixed at best, and it's going to be an arms race. So like one detection method today may be superior and may have a high positive identification rate. And next week, due to changes in the black box that Kelly and I had a street conversation, it's the AI system's the black box, right? As far as we know, there may be internal changes to that invalidate the detection mechanism. But this could be another data point, because if somebody takes 5 minutes to write a sentence or an extended period of time, we should see that to some extent. And to what extent, I don't know. Please, somebody else respond.
Yeah, Eric, I like the idea, and thinking about the way people write, it's if they pasted in 5 paragraphs, in a short period of time, or that just appeared somehow, even if it was word by word, would be unlikely that someone was doing that naturally. That being said, I don't know I don't know what would, I mean, besides the kind of obvious pasting in of large blocks of text in a single chunk. Like, I don't know what research there is on how people write, what that process would look like if you were watching it, right? If you were watching someone type live into a Google Doc, what would it look like to us, or what would more importantly, you're not gonna be able to watch people do it live. It's just not scalable really if you have that many students. So you have to be able to look at their Google Doc after they've submitted it to you or let you access it. And then Google's going to have some information about when they started it, like when they started writing and how long they took it. I mean, I don't know what data Google could give you that would help you distinguish between, for example, someone who was a really fast typer versus someone who was a really slow typer. Like I don't know what the data would look like, and I don't know if the data would be really
Well, I know from personal experience that there are edit histories within Google Docs. And now
Right.
That's something that you can intentionally, that is manually enact. I don't know whether it's something that could be automatically as a default included, which, however, if that's true, I would recommend that we consider doing something like that, because we provide this at a significant cost to the university for our students and for us to do our work. And it looks like Justin had unmuted himself. Maybe he has some information about this, so because I don't know the answer as to say, when you first open up a Google Doc, if you don't change any of the settings, will it be tracking or monitoring what you do? That I don't know. But I do know that, every time you go in there, you can choose to save that version in the edit history. It takes about 2 seconds.
I just noticed a
Sorry, go ahead.
student's paper. I thought there was some AI potentially in there. The student had given me access to edit the paper in Google Doc, but the tracking history was disabled. So I wasn't allowed to do that, even though the student gave me the editorial ability to add comments, but they had to go in there and shift that off. So there is something kind of quirky about that. Like, it should have come up. Like when I searched it on Google to see how to look at a Google Doc history of versions or editing, yeah, like that should just automatically be on by default unless the person has disabled it.
Yeah, and thank you, Kelly. And I'm not suggesting, necessarily that we go all big brother and total surveillance on what our students are doing and how they compose, but rather that we consider whether we have a true pedagogical interest and duty to perhaps implement something like this, so that, I know that our IT administrators can set all kinds of default settings, in our computers, and they could probably do that in our Google Docs as well that are submitted for our courses. And again, thank you for considering this, and I'm interested to hear if there's more details, because I just don't see how on a separate individual basis we can have anything approaching quality control here, and just as a matter of justice, if we've got X number of professors who are zealously doing their diligence, tracking down student cheating through AI used means, and then other professors who just don't give a damn, right? That's a problem. So, we need some clarity from the top on down in terms of how we're going to manage this.
So I'll jump in here, Eric. Your approach, and I can appreciate your take on it, the build a better mousetrap, so to speak. But what I suspect is that this permeates so deeply, and is so wide that without getting super big brother and IT and logging, Windows, as far as I understand, the way that Word works, for example, is that it aggregates revisions. So it's not, I don't think it tracks exactly as you're typing. It'll put a revision that's more aggregate than every time you type a character. And the process gets murky too. So in my use of AI, I will either generate placeholder content, I'll rewrite, and then I'll use AI to edit and revise, the work that I'm doing. So sometimes you're interfacing with this in an organic and murky way that it's hard to tell, what is AI content versus what is AI edited content. Is there a digital signature to AI? Or are they implementing a digital signature to tell if something has been touched by AI? That's not something I'm aware of yet, but it's something I'd be curious about. And I don't know all the options to track it, but I suspect that we're going to have to change to learn to use and leverage it, and just expect that it's a tool set that students have, just like a calculator. It changed the way that we assess math. I mean, students just have calculators, and we've, in large part, math has worked around that. And that's something that I think is coming to these other disciplines as well.
Thank you for that. And that's part of the reaction piece here, where people are still grasping at all these things. How are we going to use it? A New York Times article I've got listed here, they say it's a great benefit for the blank page problem. And so, but is that a problem that, do we want students to use it for that problem, or do we want them to struggle with the blank page? I can see cases and situations where, yeah, sometimes you want that cursor to blink and you want them to really struggle to, get over the hump of getting started. I don't know, Kelly, or if any other writing faculty have any thoughts about that. But also for me, I know if I'm looking for, if I'm just fresh out of ideas right now, I just need something to get me going. I've used that before, and I'm like, all right, I've read that now. I can start a more original thought. Before we move on to reactions, let me just talk about some of the output detection that I found. Kelly mentioned that she has heard use of just asking GPT if it wrote whatever it is. They have their own tool now called the AI text classifier. So if you'll log in, it's probably going to time me out, but you can use that link. You can use that to feed it text that you suspect to be GPT created, and supposedly it can tell you to some extent. Now I'm still in Matt's camp. I've done plenty with messing with this, and it's given me false positives and negatives. And so I don't know what your experience might be with it. And I'm sorry that the links aren't working. I should have maybe brought them up anyway. There's GPT-0. That was one of the first that emerged. It requires a login now, and I think they're going to try to have a charge for that eventually. There is another one called the Tech GPT. I don't know if it will come up. I'm just having all kinds of problems today, you all. I'm sorry. The link should be good. CopyLeaks, which is a anti-plagiarism company, wants to sell you a service, but they're providing a detection tool that you can use for free at this point. And then there is a sort of a new company founded by a former instructional designer here at EKU called Sikanai. And what it purports to do is you feed it the content that you have submitted. It asks you questions through AI generation about your content. And if you don't provide the correct answers about your content, it then flags your submission. So I don't know and God, for the life of me, I don't know why I'm having all this trouble with these links, but you can check out Auth Plus. Now it's not free. You'll have to schedule a demo or watch use case videos and look at all that. He'd love to set up a demo with you. I used an earlier version of it with him, and it was kind of primitive, but I'm sure they've made great strides since then.
Well, the design of Sikanai reminds me of, the traditional sort of Oxbridge style of learning, in which a student would write a paper and then they'd have to come sit in an office with a professor who would ask them questions about the paper they had supposedly written.
Yeah.
And I know it would be very time consuming, and not every discipline, would operate this way, but I can see myself potentially going forward, instituting a follow-up, conversation to every single essay that my students submit, so that I can, pick their brains and see if they actually wrote it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one very old school method. And it also seems to me that, when we're dealing with this AI explosion, right, and feeling confounded by these issues, we're overlooking the value of dialogue and conversation. And it may be that we want, precisely because our students are so text, and digital sort of dependent, we want to more and more require them to express themselves verbally in class, whether that's in roundtable conversations or presentations, because I don't think that they can fudge that, right? That it's going to become obvious whether or not they know their stuff when they try to speak. And if we give them enough rope, right, we'll find out the truth.
Well, I think that's why your Google Docs idea is a good, to me, if we could pull it off, it would be a good data point. I mean, we're not going to monitor, you're not going to check everybody's Google document for that stuff. But if you know a student that seems to be not very communicative, their first submission was rather weak or could use a lot of improvement, and then they come out with this manifesto or something, or a really superior writing product result, then that, maybe you're really curious and glad for their progress, but maybe everybody has an intuition, I think, that has taught for very long. You get to thinking, well, what's going on here? And then that may result, oh, well, they just dumped this within, 2 minutes and it's ready to rock. We asked them to write in the app. It's further chance for a dialogue.
Chris, and something I would say too, we found an example that was brought to us here in the library of a student who was suspected to have used ChatGPT. It was actually extremely easy to figure out that the student had used ChatGPT. And what was interesting about that case is the assignment was super easy. Write a letter. It was in the context of the class. It was to write a letter. It was not a complex letter, not anything long. It was actually something that in theory, the students might have found to be an interesting way to get at the goals of the assignment. I'll try to keep it as anonymous as possible. But what was found was the student's first language was not English. And so it was something that I think is not, we're not maybe even thinking about that. We're thinking a lot about all of the check the boxes for the student who is likely to cheat because of XYZ. But it was interesting because this assignment was very easy. They were given a very liberal amount of time to complete it. And there was just not much to it in terms of like, this is intimidating. I'm going to have to do a lot of work. I'm going to go the easy route. This student just did not have strong English communication skills, written, not really strong oral, but also known to be not have strong English writing skills. And so that's something that I hadn't even really considered very much before we encountered. And the student did talk to the professor. The professor was also brought out that our academic integrity policy, his comment about that was that it's kind of draconian because on the one hand, the student admits to cheating, admits to whatever, I'm going to say cheating with air quotes, whatever that looks like, cheating, that there's a lot more flexibility with how to deal with that student than if the student flat out denies it. And then it kind of seems like it's, the next step is supposed to be go to a higher authority. Yeah. And the faculty member really wanted the student to admit it, really wanted the student to fess up so he could work with him to, figure out what was going on and how can we work together to, so the faculty member was really wanting to give the student sort of the benefit of the doubt or whatever. But I thought that was an interesting thing to consider if you have students whose, and of course, there's plenty of students for whom English is their first language and they don't have good writing skills, obviously. Right. But I think it's a challenge that I had not really thought a lot about for students for whom English is not their first language and they're being asked to write something truly a quote unquote simple piece of writing. Yeah, so just fodder, food for thought.
No, thank you. I mean, there's so many concepts there to unpack. My first thought was the tool Grammarly, which is a freemium grammar spelling usage checker. Lots of people use that, and it is AI driven, and it will take a pretty bad, run-on sentence and fix that for you pretty quickly, well enough. And so is that a problem? Or whose problem is that? Is that unfaithful to an assignment? So in certain classes, it would be unfaithful. But then as you move up, like I need people telling me I screw up my emails all the time. Like I'm trying to type them so fast and just get the response sent that, I commit errors, and maybe a tool like that would help me not be so error ridden. That's just one thing.
Yeah, what I'm hearing Eric and Cindy say is that, writing content used to be the goal, used to be the way that we would see if people understood things or not. Now the goalpost has moved because we essentially have a calculator for writing. So what is the new goal beyond just writing the content that we then assess? So I think Eric and Cindy were both getting to that.
Thank you.
I gotta say, I'm more worried about the idea, the analogy of a calculator here, because in a calculator, you still have to know the equations. I mean, the calculator doesn't do all the work for you. I'm finding, like, Cindy, to your point, I've found it in discussion board posts that should be, like, again, an exercise in a composition class that is easy and kind of fun, like writing about, your worries about your project. Like that should be stuff that students can compose in a low stakes assignment. And I'm finding ChatGPT writing that stuff. I mean, that's just wholesale, like taking the writing and putting it in as your own. There's no calculating going on there.
Right. That's lazy.
Other than, like, you have to ask you have to put the right prompt in the ChatGPT in order to generate what you need. But it's not the high stake, like it's not stress and anxiety, right? It's not the high stakes assignments. It's literally everywhere in all the types of assignments. And I've met with students in my 101 composition classes because we do one-on-one consultations. I'm finding it with the students who aren't English as a second language, or even English as a first language kind of seems like a second language. Like, these are students who are competent and could write, like do actually have the skills, and they're using it. Yeah. So I gotta say that I disagree with the whole calculator thing. I feel like you still got to do the math. You still have to know the equations. You got to go to math class. The calculator isn't doing that for you. It's just running some numbers. But
so
Kelly,
did you ask them? I mean, I'm so curious about those people. I mean, why do those students, do they tell you why they're using ChatGPT for something? It seems like it's more work to write the prompt than there is to write just the discussion board post. I mean, it's weird.
I've processed one that I found. So a student wrote a paper on something that it looked funny. I searched it on Google, couldn't find anything. Then I heard about typing in to ChatGPT, OpenAI, did you generate this text? And then putting the whole text in quotation marks. And ChatGPT basically wrote this entire essay. And so I sent that through to Academic Integrity, and I sent it in with, I would give the student a 0 on the assignment. So the least penalty, gives the student a 0 on the assignment, and then have the student rewrite the paper. And the student just refused to rewrite the paper, took the 0 without the option to rewrite, which tells me they don't want to, like this student in particular anyway, doesn't want to write. Right. And so I think that's part of what's going on with like the low stakes things, like school gets in the way of other things that you have to do. Like maybe it's work and responsibilities with family. Maybe it's a combination of that and just things that you enjoy. And this technology is doing the writing for you. And that's what they're using it for, whether they're capable of writing or not, whether the assignments are high stakes or low stakes. Like, I'm not saying they're all doing this, but a good chunk of them are. And then you find even weirder things where I think they're using AI, but then they're changing the language so that it doesn't recognize. And now the papers become, or the writing becomes incoherent because they don't know how to use synonyms, because they don't have the vocabulary to actually change the language. So now I'm sitting there trying to grade incoherent, I mean, absolutely incoherent writing. Like, and I've never seen that. Like, and I've been a teacher since '98. I'm old.
Isn't that interesting? That's such an interesting perspective that we can't allow this tool. It's what I'm hearing is this tool at certain stages of one's reading and writing development is not going to bear good fruit. Very interesting.
No, but the empty page that gets them to think might. Like, just back to that whole idea of like, it's okay to struggle to write. I mean, Tolstoy struggled, you know, Dickens struggled. Like, that's the nature of writing, is that it's a struggle. And unless you kind of go through that and get experience with that, you aren't going to be an effective communicator when you go out into the world, when you go out into your job place. Like, how are you going to suddenly be able to construct ideas and synthesize ideas and connect things and communicate things effectively if something else has been doing that for you during the time that you actually had to learn this stuff? And you know, and we all want students to succeed. We want them to become stronger communicators. This seems to be a potential obstacle for that growth process to happen. That keeps me up at night.
Kelly, that worries me too. Although I would say that my guess is that workplaces are going to adapt and adopt AI more quickly than we are. So when they leave us and go into the workplace, you know, it's not going to be that they're cut loose from AI and they have to rely on their withered skills that they didn't develop in higher ed. It's going to be that they're going to walk in and they're going to say, okay, here are the things that we're going to use AI for at our workplace. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I just think that's likely to happen. And, you know, this goes back to my general approach to this, which is I have no idea what the right or wrong thing is, because we just don't know what it's going to do or what it's going to turn into. And, you know, I think in some ways, I think I spent a lot of wasted time trying to figure this out, because in a month it's going to be different, and in a year it's going to be different. And, you know, we're figuring out problems that are, you know, time date, you know, it has an expiration date stamped on it. That's, you know, not years out, it's months and maybe weeks out before it's, you know, out of date and it's not relevant. So I don't know what the answer is. It's just, you know, we gotta focus on it. We have to think about it, but it's so frustrating to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a moving target right now, and I am spending. I mean, like I'm spending way too much time reading about it, and the game changes, and then, you know, it blows away all the potential strategies. I'll skip over this slide here, but this first link has an interview with a professor from Sussex. I don't know, and he had some good thoughts about that, but it doesn't address your point, Kelly, that students need to struggle and they need to ask perhaps mundane questions, at least of themselves, but they need to go through a thought process to develop their own thinking and abilities without the crutch, as it were. And we've already kind of been
just briefly bring up, as somebody who teaches gen ed English classes, you know, 101 and 102, you know, the idea of struggle, Kelly, I understand, you know, but the problem is, you know, I have students that are basically in construction management and golf management or whatever else. They just want to get through these courses. They don't give a damn about, you know, basically learning how to write better or anything. It's a mandatory class. They want to be done with it, and they're going to use whatever tool. I mean, we had plagiarism from the beginning, you know, in some way or the other. This is just doing it a bit better for them, you know, and they will use it because they have other things on their minds, and certainly not the damn writing class they don't want to take in the first place. You know, I mean, we got to be realistic about that. So, You know, I mean, we might have to rethink writing classes, period. You know, I mean, obviously we'll end up with stuff written by AI. And do we just shrug our shoulders, or do we bother with these courses anymore, what they should have learned in high school anyway, etc. So that's my 5 cents here.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Those are much tougher, much tougher questions for me. But I was talking with a faculty member yesterday, in fact, who teaches writing, and she said maybe the essay is not dead, but it's maybe put to another writing class, and everybody else learns a more functional, I think rather staid version of writing, written communications. So we've already talked about some of these things on this slide. I'm hearing that maybe you think more and more students are cheating, especially in the shadow of ChatGPT. You know, we have a lot of faculty who tell me, you know, most of my students don't cheat. Is that true? I don't know. I haven't taught enough classes to be able to get a beat on it. They don't have nearly the experience you all do. But I do want to, you know, think about what explains cheating. And I think people have given me a good perspective on it. Is it worse in online or face-to-face? You know, I'm in the online world, and certainly our world is more fraught in certain ways, and the face-to-face world has their own challenges too. And we also, I think, have to recognize when we talk about academic integrity, we're not just talking about GPT. So are there lessons we've learned from dealing with past situations that might inform, you know, what we're doing? Does anybody have thoughts about that? I want to show this fraud triangle. I think this is pretty old, but it's from 2009 is like the most recent old version of this, that where there's incentive or pressure. And I hear a lot about pressure, like student pressure, really causing them to consider being dishonest or going outside the boundaries of the assignment, and where they have these rationalizations or attitudes, and I'll talk about those in a second. And then when they have the the right opportunity, that's when we start seeing dishonesty. And this came from the accounting world, I think. Those attitudes are the diplomas, and this is from a Peterson article. Diploma is just the foot in the door. The grade's more important than the learning. Everyone's doing it, and it isn't hurting anybody. Technology replaces knowing facts, which now I think that's like the big thing. Like the technology can replace my ability to have to just know facts, which I think, or know how to struggle with the blank page, or whatever it is. The entire internet is public information. That subculture values, certain college subcultures support each other in these dishonest acts, and that higher education is just a transaction. I wanted to get your reactions to that. And please, we have some IT folks. Don't want to call anybody out specifically, but we're more than glad that you're here and to hear your perspective. How can we implement some of the things we'd like to do? What are the limitations? What are your thoughts?
This is Chris Bronny. I'm with our systems administrator group here at EKU.
Yeah, Chris.
And, I'm 47 years old. I flunked out of college the first time, but as an employee, I am now a student here and have been since 2017. So as a unique perspective, and this is just a sideline because y'all talked about a calculator. Prior to ChatGPT, there's a website called Wolfram Alpha. It is the AI equivalent of ChatGPT for math. You can naturally you could copy a word problem from any of the math classes I've ever been in and paste it in there and get probably mostly the right answer. The word problems can be made to circumvent that, but if you have a minor amount of understanding of the problem, it's pretty good. Mathway is another product that is not a calculator, but you can copy a formula. If you gave me a problem in a formulaic level and I pasted it in there, it will flat out solve it. And more, I have used Mathway personally when I didn't understand something, because if you pay for something, it'll walk you through the steps of how to solve it. So it is a fairly effective teacher if you're struggling, calculus specifically, like, oh, how did they do that? Oh, okay, I can see the steps. So that's just kind of a sideline. But my perspective is I've got 20 plus years in IT, and we are kind of still a rare industry in that we are more of a meritocracy, I believe, than certain other industries, in that, I have no college education. I flunked out of college and was able to maintain a high level of competency in IT. And that seems to be exacerbating other industries now with the advent of ChatGPT. Like, again, writing being, I'm not a good writer. I never have been. I don't even go to ChatGPT to make myself write better. I just write terribly because I functionally just have to get information from one person to the other. That being said, I use ChatGPT professionally ever since it's been out in demo because it can write code. But from like the computer science standpoint, we teach coding. I am firmly in the thing of like, why would I learn a given language? I understand the logic of coding, like that. The algorithmic side of coding is something ChatGPT can't do and may never be great at, but the syntax of writing code is kind of moot at this point. Like, it does a really good job, and that's not 100%. You kind of do have to know some of the idiosyncrasies of a given language, but it's pretty amazing for that. So like my 2 cents are, it's not going to get worse. It's going to get better. It's going to get harder to detect. And then the ability to check against ChatGPT that it did something. At some point, they're going to release what we call an API, which lets me as a programmer interact with ChatGPT in a more custom level. People will just build software to do the work, and ChatGPT may not be aware that like you could ask ChatGPT proper, hey, did you do this? It will answer no, but in truth, it did. It just doesn't know that it necessarily did, because I, as a programmer, could write an API to obscure said fact. And that's that's just going to be money to be made by, the Chegg, probably, if I had to guess.
Right.
They're not, there to make money. And then the final thing I'll say is, I'm not to go against academia, but as somebody that worked in the corporate world, people will just fail if they rely on this and they go into a profession where they rely too heavily on it. ChatGPT or whatever the technology at the time, and they can't adapt. I mean, the ultimate truth is everything is a meritocracy at that point.
That's a great point. Thank you for all that, Chris, and thanks for speaking up, because those are some perspectives I think are important. Mariana, I wanted to not skip over you. You had your hand up. I want to make sure that you are heard.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. I just wanted to say, I think you made some great points. And I know that all of us as faculty and other positions have a lot on our plate. And I'm not trying to say, I don't know whose job this is, but I think some of us in our classes can definitely help students learn, use these tools in our classes. And I think that's really, I'm a writing professional, and I think that's really kind of how I'm inspired by ChatGPT. I know my students are using it, and so I'm just gonna be working to try to work with the tool. I as I've heard lots of people say, writing professionals are going to use this in the workplace, and so let's use it as a teaching tool when we can. Again, I know that that's not applicable to all professors in all of their classes, but some of us will be needing to do that work, and I personally think it's useful to help students see the affordances and constraints of ChatGPT, because as we've all talked about here, they are using it, they're going to use it. So, we need to be curious, just like our students are, of why they are tempted to use it and how we can use it instead of fighting against it. So.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think attitude, like trying to fight some of these attitudes, is important, but also, we're building, what's the term, the 21st century jobs that haven't been invented yet. And I feel certain that some of them will emerge from the use and incorporation of these generative tools to do things that we used to not do in the same way. I wanted to bring up just the concept of, if we were set on trying to prevent, what might be some old strategies, and a couple I'm certain that you're going to know several of these, but I feel certain you may not have considered a few of these. But first, I asked AI Elon Musk last night how we can prevent cheating in college courses, and he gave an answer, and you can refer to the presentation. He's a real smart aleck, so he's a piece of work online. So you can go to that character.ai, I think, whenever it's available, and talk to him, or talk to Lilo and Stitch, or one of the characters that they've created. Jenny mentioned this, but in Jenny Whitehouse journalism last session, but she believes most of her students are, I think I heard her say that most of her students are honest, and she just needs to engage them and explain and try to dispel some of these sort of dysfunctional attitudes about, why we have academic honesty and why we engage these deeper thinking processes, that it's for their own learning and development as people and as professionals and as, career ready individuals. They're professional, like in some disciplines, there are immediate professional implications for cheating, or dishonesty. I know there are in nursing, and I'm not a nurse, but worked with them for a long time. That's almost immediate grounds for major problems. And I'm sure that there are other disciplines here on campus where that's the same thing too. I think it diminishes self-confidence. Like if you're constantly relying on, these crutches, you need to struggle a little bit, and then you gain a lot, and being able to pump up that self-confidence in our students when it's rightly deserved, I think it was very powerful to me. I don't know about any of you, and there could be even legal consequences, especially when you get outside the university for some of these things. Any thoughts about that?
Well, I wonder if students will even consider it cheating. I mean, in plagiarism, right? You're stealing intellectual content from someone. But are you really doing this when the content comes from a non-person? Like gets into, like, do you have to be a person in order to have content stolen from you and to have your right to that content infringed? So would they even consider it cheating in the first place?
Well, I think that's a great point. Like, are we making this, the expectations clear? Are we setting that as an expectation? I've written a short syllabus statement in one of my upcoming classes where I don't want them engaging ChatGPT for our discussion boards. So please don't do that. Charlotte, you have a point.
Yeah, just for what it's worth, and I haven't looked at it recently, so I should check before I say this, but I believe our academic integrity policy at EKU also allowed for things like falsification of data, right? So more in the sciences or something, other elements of academic dishonesty to result in a product being submitted. So you're right, Kelly, absolutely, right? Like taking somebody else's writing and passing it off as your own, that becomes this question of what's a person, right? With AI, really deep philosophical questions, right? But I'm saying, I think there's some language in our academic integrity policy for other types of academic dishonesty that, I mean, maybe that is sort of what this would fall under, were someone to want to take it to an academic integrity case. And I'm not saying I think that's what we need to be doing. I don't know. It's all too new to me as well, but it's obviously concerning. So
thank you for that. Do we think about positive classroom environment at all? It's a question. I mean, I like to think that in my online classes, I'm a positive person. I use language to support and show enthusiasm and respond in a timely manner using effective instructional feedback as I know it to be. What are your thoughts about that? Would that help, or do you think somebody that's hell-bent on getting the bot to do the work is just going to ignore that?
Well, I think this is important, and someone I follow on Twitter, his mantra is trust students, and that's his starting point and his clear value. And I think if we tell, I mean, and going back to what Charlotte said, I think if we don't want them to use ChatGPT, I don't think we can rely on EKUs and academic integrity policy to make it clear that they can't. But if we say to them, I don't want you to use ChatGPT, like you said, Chris, please don't use ChatGPT, and then they do, then they've done something we asked them not to do. And I think that's a violation. But I think, again, it goes a long way to say to students, I don't want you to use ChatGPT. I don't want you to use this resource. I want you to do this work, and here's the value of doing that work. And I'm going to trust you to do that work. My experience is that students don't have a lot of past history of that kind of attitude coming from instructors. In K-12, it's very much, it seems like it's a very policing attitude of command and obedience, whereas we have a chance to say, here's the reason why I want you to do it this way, and I'm going to trust that you do it. And I'm sure I've gotten burned in saying it that way by students taking advantage of my trust, but I guess I'm sort of willing to take that risk. And as we've said before, the consequences for the student of cheating in that way are going to accrue to them, at some point in the future. And if they know that, I don't know, I guess it's up to them to decide what they want to do, but I think that contributes to this positive classroom environment you're talking about, Chris.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I totally agree. We're entering into human relationships, and that's a very powerful thing, and trust. I want to show one thing that I think maybe some people know about that have been doing, especially online learning, quite a while, but it's the concept of an integrity gateway. It's a statement that you make students agree to, presumably read. They may just click through it, I guess, but you get them to acknowledge not only do they know about the academic integrity policy, but they affirm that they are an honest person. And there's some, I don't know, research, but there's some thought that suggests that, looking yourself in the mirror, as it were, and saying that you're an honest person may help with some of that. Now, I think Matt's version of this is gentler and probably better, that I trust you, here's the assignment, here's the rationale, and here's how you're going to benefit from it and grow. And that can be powerful too. Maybe you could have a nuanced statement that is more, before you submit, just remember why you've done this assignment. But it's a statement that they presumably agree to before they submit the assignment online that they have to acknowledge.
It's kind of weird because in my 102 class, there is an assignment where they have to talk about plagiarism and what constitutes plagiarism, and they have to read through, the policy at EKU about plagiarism. And they write about plagiarism as though, like, they all say this. It's like, why would anybody do this? Why would you come to college and cheat? You're only cheating yourself. Like, I get more content than I'm asking for in the assignment directions. It's like write up like a 300-word post, and I end up with these, 1,000-word posts that go on. And it's just like this weird disjunct, right? They're writing about this and they recognize how wrong it is, and they don't want to be associated with it. They think it's a point of character. And then yet at the same time, you find it everywhere, like this form of cheating, like whether it's using AI or just, cutting and pasting off the internet. Like, I wonder how much they really understand what plagiarism is. Like it to create that kind of, it's like a cognitive dissonance or something like that, because they can certainly write about why it's wrong. So I mean, just throwing it out there. It's a very strange phenomenon.
That's interesting. Yeah. No answers there for me. We're out of time. So thank you all so much for being here today. Lots of other things I would consider, but in online, I always think about, we're scaling these courses, and, some people think that's a terrible thing, and it's definitely a product that people like. I question, how do we scale, an anti-plagiarism and academic integrity process when we have 100 students or more? How do we reduce faculty workload in all this? I think that's a big question that I don't know the answer to, but we should think more about that. And how do we simplify a workflow when we're evaluating, maybe writing assessments or other types of assessments? But Eric, I'm going to look into your Google Docs question. Please email me or contact me if I can do anything for you relative to this. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm going to stop the recording, but I'll stay on if people want to talk further. Again, thanks so much for this session and your time today. It was really good for me to hear you all.